These are challenging times. Our world is changing. It's becoming more dangerous and divided. Our adversaries are increasingly emboldened, and the norms that have kept Canada and the world secure and prosperous are in peril. The priorities of the United States, once closely aligned to ours, have shifted. The threats to our sovereignty are multiplying. And in response, we have to give our armed forces the new resources that they need to defend our sovereignty with a made-in-Canada defense procurement approach that will help our defense businesses to grow here at home, all while diversifying their markets and growing their cooperation and sales abroad. For too long, our military has been both underfunded and overly reliant on the United States. Under the last Conservative government, when Pierre Poilievre was a minister, we in Canada were spending less than 1% of our GDP on defense. The Conservatives starved our armed forces, and shamefully they abandoned our veterans, closing offices across the country. We are also modernizing NORAD, investing in new technologies and working with new partners, including Australia. We're building new military installations and increasing the presence of the Canadian Armed Forces in the Arctic year-round to defend our sovereignty, the North, and those who call it home. Today, I'm announcing our plan to build the tools needed to ensure Canada's sovereignty, to support a new approach to made-in-Canada defense procurement, while helping our industries and businesses reach new markets around the world. So this is very much, a lot of this is about process. And the first thing is to take procurement into a new, defense procurement into a new centralized agency. The second, so that there's a focus on delivering the security that Canadians need with the equipment that we need, to provide that agency with greater powers and flexibility, so that there are exceptions, for example, with respect to the level of competition that's required in terms of defense contracting, speed with which contracts can be struck, integration and a priority put on Canadian suppliers and Canadian supply chain that's going to deliver it, and then as well integrating, and this is one of the points I made towards the end, and this is, I think, very important, integrating with the new approach that's being developed in Europe, in the European Union, so-called ReArm Europe. It may be rebranded, but ReArm Europe, which is a major defense initiative. And we've been talking directly to our European partners, both at the national level, the French government, for example, and the European level, to ensure that Canada, or to enable Canada to be part of that process, so that we are part of that entire defense supply chain. Obviously, we get economies of scale, economies of scope, efficiencies from that, but we diversify our reliable partners. So there's change to process in terms of speed, scale, expertise, and there's change to the relationships in terms of, or there's development of relationships with new, very large, reliable partners that we come through.
You've talked about made-in-Canada defense procurement. You've put the F-35 acquisition under review. The CEO of this company, Bombardier, has raised concerns about that, about losing reciprocity and access to the U.S. market for their products. There's a U.S.-Canada defense agreement that allows Canadian companies to bid on U.S. military contracts. So will your policies lead to Canadian companies losing access to U.S. defense bidding?
That's thank you, Mr. Clark, for that question. Look, the intention is not for that, but the intention is also to recognize, and our duty, I think, is to recognize how the relationship, both economic and defense and security relationship with the United States, is shifting. As there's greater emphasis in the United States on domestic industrial strategy and a host of areas, that has implications for the way we approach our defense procurement. There's an enormous opportunity as well as we dramatically increase our defense spending to ensure that as much as possible we have the maximum economic benefit here in Canada through great companies such as Bombardier, but many others from CAE and others across the defense supply chain. we will have, this is one other reason, as if we needed another reason, one other reason why the upcoming negotiations with the Americans on a new economic and security partnership that President Trump and I agreed on, why that is so important, and why it's important who's at the table, and that when Canada arrives at that table, that there is a comprehensive made in Canada approach to our interests, so that we're negotiating on behalf of the biggest impact for Canada.
As a follow-up, today you're talking about a made in Canada procurement strategy. You're also talking about negotiating with the United States.
Yes.
So are you willing to negotiate away your made in Canada strategy in order to retain access to U.S. defense markets?
Again, thank you for the question. So let me give an example specifically, if I may draw on the situation here. So what's happening, and it's a very fluid trading situation, as you know, with the United States. But certain exemptions, for example, under the, I will call them the fentanyl tariffs, the unjustified fentanyl tariffs, are for what are called CUSMA compliant trade. Okay? So if you have certain thresholds of production, I'm explaining for broadly, I think you know this, but for a production here in Canada and with other CUSMA partners, and you can verify that, then you're not subject to those fentanyl tariffs. That is an opportunity on which we can build in terms of the upcoming negotiation. And that's an opportunity that will integrate a made in America and a made in Canada defense procurement approach. But last point, if I may, which maybe should have been my first one. When you go into a negotiation, you have to know where you stand. You have to know what you want. You have to be strong. You have to be clear. That's why we're setting out these policies. They're in the interests of Canada. They're the interests of Canadian workers. They're in the interest of Canadian security. And so we will be negotiating from a position of strength with the Americans. Thank you.